Hey everyone, I'm live on YouTube. I'm live on YouTube, and you may not have heard me say, hey everyone, because I can't tell. Anyway, my control for the video is over here. I'm looking, we've got audio there. And then I have my GarageBand control. Ooh, we have audio there too. Okay, so here's the deal, guys. I decided today that I wanted to do a live stream of the podcast that we're putting out while I record it. And that means it'll be a little bit different than the podcast that goes out on the podcatcher. First, though, I need to pull my notes up because YouTube closed everything. So one moment, please. Stand by. I don't know why it had to be difficult, but it was very confused about what I was trying to do. Probably because I'm using this mic right here for two audio streams, and that's probably to record it twice. I will. And then the other way this is different than a podcast that you would hear on the audio. When I record podcasts with audio and I start talking and I make a really bad mistake, or I'm listening to myself and I'm so bored by what I'm saying that you must be more bored than I am, because I should at least be interested in what I have to say, right? I'll go back to a break point, and I will end up I'll just cut in and re-recording. So I edit as I go. I don't go back and edit out ums or blah or anything else that I do. I just cut it and do it as I go. I'm not going to do that with the video. The video is live. If you're tuned in now, in theory, there's some control way I can see y'all, but I can't. Oh, there's 3 of you. And I may or may not be able to respond to chat. In fact, I'm sure I won't. But here's what's going to happen. I'm going to introduce the podcast. I'm going to get it going on my GarageBand. And then you guys can see what it's like when I stream episodes. If you prefer to listen to the podcast sorts of materials on YouTube, you can do that, because I'm going to start live streaming them all. The other one thing I'd like to give is sometimes when I go down a rabbit hole really the wrong way, or sometimes when I forget to turn my mic on or to hit record, I say a stream of bad words. I will avoid the F-bomb, but I might say the S word. Sorry. Not sorry, but it's how I actually talk, and I'm not trying to hide who I am or how I talk on this. I do try not to swear on the podcast, because I know a lot of you have children listening, but maybe don't have them on YouTube if you don't want to hear the S bomb. S, not F. I will not say the F bomb. I can promise you that, even if I get really upset. So with that, I'm going to start the episode. So first, what I do is I hit the record button on my podcast stuff. Welcome, everyone, to Living Free in Tennessee. Today is Friday, March 13th, 2020. That's right. It's Friday the 13th today at Living Free in Tennessee. It's probably Friday the 13th at your place, too. And it's been a freaky Friday kind of week, hasn't it? With all the COVID stuff breaking out and really coming to a head. I hope you guys are ready to stay home if you need to. And if you're not, that you're not panicked about having to, because there is still time to get ready. If you're not, just make sure you have enough food and water. That's the thing you need the most. And if you are ready, I'm proud of you. Thank you for doing that, because all of us who are ready right now are not at the stores where the people are who need to buy the things. We don't have to buy the things. We can stay home. And that means there's more for the people who really need it now. With that, I'm going to jump into the episode. Today is a Thought of the Walk Day. And I thought it would be a great time among all of this panic to explore a concept that has nothing to do with a virus. And that's the concept of champagne and hookers. I covered champagne and hookers on an episode about 2 weeks ago that I did on how to pay off debt, how I'm paying off my debt. I shared actual numbers with you of what I'm doing and kind of opened myself up. And when you guys heard me say, don't spend money as one of my principles, don't spend money on champagne and hookers, I got so much feedback on that I thought, you know what, I should tell you a little bit more about what that is and where it came from. Also, today was a really interesting day in the holler. So I'm recording this a little later than I usually do. And that's because as I was getting ready to record this, I heard over my CB radio from my 2 neighbors a question. And the question they asked me was, do you know where the Starnes Cemetery is? And I was like, what? No. And I said, why? And they said, well, there's these people here who are looking for the Starnes Cemetery because they're looking for, and they described a story of a woman and a child who died in 1891. And the interesting thing is, right over the fence line from where I live are two graves, and they have stones like put out on the grave, in the shape of a coffin kind of, and it's a big pile of stones. And one is a big one and one is a little one. And so I said, well, there is a Starnes cemetery in another town, but there are two graves that are, I know where they are and I can show them to them, that might be those because the time matches what they would be. And so these ladies came up and they looked at them, and here's what was going on. There is a woman dying right now in McMinnville, I think in McMinnville, Tennessee. And she was saying she spent her whole life looking for the grave of her great grandmother and a child. She died during childbirth and had never found it, had heard it had been bulldozed over. And if it was a cemetery spot, there are only two graves that are left. So part of it has been. But they had in reference, because they did genealogical research, in reference, they had the house number where that cabin is, and they had the word Starnes. And there used to be a store called the Starnes store at the foot of this hill. Wow. So that they came here and they took pictures of the grave. They were able to text them to the lady who is in a nursing home passing away so that she can see them before she dies, because she spent her whole life looking for it. But here's the other thing that's interesting. So we have a compiled history of the holler we live in. And one of my next door neighbor, who, like the guy who owns the place next to me, he rents it out to Nighthawk. And that guy spent a lot of time looking up just what happened in this area, from moonshine stills to farms to feuds. And it's got a very rich history and a very interesting history. And he's put it together in a book. Mama Sauce has been slowly typing that up, which is kind of cool. And we thought we knew who were in those graves. And then we realized we didn't. And he thought he knew too. And now we may have unraveled that mystery. So I got all the information. I'm going to send it to him and we're going to do our best to verify, but we may have just put another chapter in the holler history, which is kind of neat. So that delayed me a little bit because it was an interesting thing. And I decided to take a little time with them and see, well, okay, so now I have two names and one of those may be one of the people in the grave. And the time, it was eerie. Like we were pretty sure the graves were somewhere around 1880, 1891 is when the woman died. Not bad. Okay, I also want to remind you, if you want to send me feedback or comments or questions to Stump the Sauce, you can do that by emailing me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com, or go to the website, livingfreeintennessee.com, click on contact. There's a form you fill out. It goes to me. A lot of the submissions I get are like weird spam stuff, but I get good comments too. So just send it to me. I actually just got today the first of a set of expert counsel questions. It's been requested that I do an expert counsel show, and I have a list of names in the show notes of people and their expertise. I will put a website page together, and I've had some people reach out to me and say, hey, I think you could use an expert on this, and I think I'd be a good expert at it. So if you're one of those people, use my contact form and let me know. And maybe you'll be on my expert counsel. If I get enough questions coming in and enough people to answer them, I will be glad to do a fourth show a week. So that's how you do it. Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, it is time for the main topic of today's show. And that's the thought of the walk on champagne and hookers. Yeah. Champagne and hookers. Okay, there, I said it. I said it twice. I've said it like 3 times. This is a concept I've built into my debt payoff strategy for many years. And it's really more like the avoidance of champagne and hookers and not so much champagne and hookers. And more specifically, when I said that term in my podcast a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people thought it was funny. Like, I had the podcast out and within an hour, I'm getting comments on social media, LOL, champagne and hookers, blah, blah, blah. They thought it was funny. I'm pretty sure it is funny. And one of the reasons funny is that you guys know I don't mean actual champagne and hookers, right? I never did have that habit in my life, but it's a concept. And my philosophy on champagne and hookers is related to debt payoff. And it's a simple concept. Those things are expensive. Champagne and hookers are expensive if you're doing it right, and you should avoid them if you have debt. You might want to avoid them if you don't have debt, but you should definitely avoid them if you have debt. And because they merely provide an instant gratification, right? They're not really a long-term thing. You drink that bottle of champagne and it's gone. It's not adding to your long-term happiness. It was one fun night. And when you dedicate funds to those kinds of instant gratification happinesses rather than developing a long, sustainable, self-sufficient happiness in your life, you're not taking care of your basic needs. You have a tendency to then build that habit into a need for that instant gratification. And then that makes you in turn spend money you shouldn't spend. That makes you financially unhealthy. When you're financially unhealthy, it becomes too hard to pay off the debt. When it's too hard to pay off the debt, you give up and you want to feel healthy or happy. And then you go for instant gratification again, like going out to a big expensive sushi dinner, perhaps. And your money debt just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's all because of champagne and hookers. So champagne and hookers will keep you from climbing out of debt from the bad habits they create. Not just because champagne and hookers are bad. And guys, don't get me wrong. I like a good glass of champagne from time to time. One glass, not the whole bottle. And I think one key to getting your financial house in order is to stop buying those things that give you instant gratification that fall into the champagne and hooker category, right? So you want to replace those with an emotional, which is you're like answering an emotional need for happiness. You want to replace those with something that can bring you true happiness and not just that fleeting moment. And when you learn to start doing that, when you build that skill and when you've identified your list of champagne and hooker items, I think it's a powerful tool to use. And I know some of you are cringing right now because I'm using the term champagne and hookers. You probably have, some of you have a religious objection to the whole concept of hookerdom, right? And I use that crass term with myself on purpose. I use champagne and hookers when I'm thinking about those things in my life, those bad habits, because I am programming myself not to do something. And it's a shock factor. I'm intentionally shocking myself by using the term champagne and hookers because I want to program myself to perceive some of my quote unquote champagne and hooker habits as really, really bad. Okay. And if I categorize the things that I do in that way, and I think about it that way, I'm less likely to keep doing those bad habits. And for me, these bad habits have included, and I'm sure I've missed some, but when I thought about it today, I thought in the last 10 years, what are my champagne and hooker habits? Expensive bottles of bourbon. That's something that gives me instant gratification. It's going to last longer than a night unless I want to go to the hospital, but it's gone. You consume it and it's gone. Being out of the country on vacation when I still have debt. So spending thousands of dollars to go to Japan may not have been the best choice when I already had debt. Kitchen gadgets I don't really need. I don't need a yogurt maker, for example. Luckily, that's a funny example because I ended up with a yogurt maker that somebody gave me. So that was free. It was not a champagne or hooker expense. But had I decided to buy one, I don't really need one. And that $25 to $50 is money that can go towards debt payoff when you have debt. It is important to have a functioning kitchen to be able to cook, to keep yourself from going out to eat, though. So there's a balance there. But kitchen gadgets that I could do without, and I have a kitchen gadget addiction. I do. And I can't explain it. I mean, I guess it's because I love being in the kitchen. But the kitchen gadget addiction means that I get instant gratification when I buy the kitchen thing, and then I may or may not really need it, use it, or ever see it again. And then you end up with this kitchen full of clutter that you can't maintain, which makes you miserable. And then you buy more kitchen gadgets to make it better, right? Wait a minute. None of that helps me get out of debt. Home decorations I'll never put up or use. I did that for a long time. I think I told you that story in the debt payoff episode where I was getting Southern Living magazine and trying to live up to that standard, and I'm not there. And not only am I not there, I don't want to put that much time into my decoration. Movies, books, other entertainment items, definitely a champagne and hooker item for me. I used to buy whole series. I used to buy books on Amazon all the time because it's just like, bam, you got that book. You paid $5. That can add up. I read a lot of books. I go through like 2 books a week, guys. That adds up quickly on Amazon. Or you subscribe to their thingy and that subscription adds up for, the Kindle, whatever, unlimited. That adds up quickly. By the end of the year, I've spent more than $100 on books. That's $100. It could have gone to pay off debt. Electronic devices. I used to have the most up-to-date phone, the most up-to-date computer, any other new e-reading device that came out. I was all over the gadgets because I was working in a technology influenced world. I've got this. It's not in here because I'm afraid it will go off silent and somebody will say something on Zello. I've got this fairly old Samsung 7 Edge thingy. It cost me $250 used. I've had it for 2 years. It's got a cracked screen. It's starting to slow down and hate me. And I'm still using it. And I'm going to use it until I can't use it anymore if I still have debt. Weekly house cleaning service. There's one. That's one of my champagne and hooker sort of expenses. Eating out was a big one. I've wasted more money on eating out when I shouldn't have. And then, just overall keeping up with the Joneses. Those are my weak spots. And so when I say champagne and hookers, what are your weak spots? What's the instant gratification that's keeping you from paying off debt? Not only because it costs money, but also because it instills in you a habit or a dependence on that rush that you get when you spend the money on that item, and then you use it up and it's gone. So the term actually does come from somebody I know, and I know them pretty well. And at one point in their life, they went bankrupt. And they had an unfortunate habit of gambling, nights out, expensive drinks, drugs, and yes, actual hookers. In bankruptcy, this all came to a halt for that person and they changed their life. And when I think about building a life I want to live on my terms, out of debt, forward momentum, independence, I think about that person's story because they had to go much lower than I ever went. Much, much lower. And I remind myself when I'm tempted to do a champagne and hooker thing, when I'm tempted to do that, like to have that sushi feast that I have done so many times in the past and didn't have money to pay for it, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to go there. So I think everybody has a different set of champagne and hooker items, and they are habits to address. And the pesky part is that, well, sometimes that thing that is your short-term fix, that's your instant gratification, causing bad spending habits, may also be the thing that you need to keep in your life to get out of debt, to propel you forward. And if you take my house cleaner example, like right now I don't have one. And it's something I used to just do whenever I was miserable and felt overwhelmed by house tasks. What I've concentrated on over the last couple years is getting better at doing my house tasks for myself like I used to be when I quote unquote had more time. Well, it's about making time, right? And so when I get really, really busy, I was always quick to land on get a house cleaner in. But you know what, guys? I'm also building 3 businesses at once. And really, it's going to be 2 by the end of the year. I'll still be doing the same things, but they're defined more in 2 buckets. And the time may be coming really, really soon. As long as the economy doesn't also cause me to lose all my income after all of these quarantines, the time may be coming really, really soon where it makes sense for me to spend money on a bi-weekly housekeeper. It may make sense because that 4 hours that person spends may be the 4 hours that I need to grow my business enough to make even more money than I'm paying that person to be there. And that's why you have to take this approach of, well, what's the ROI on the time for the champagne and hooker item? Is it actually, can it be spun in a way that moves things forward or not? And if so, when and how do I build that in? All the while keeping that debt payoff thing in mind. And also, all work and no rest is not healthy. And if you're not healthy, you're not able to function. If you're not healthy, you're not going to get yourself out of debt. I think something a lot of people who talk about debt payoff are wrong about, or not wrong, they just don't really talk about it, is like taking care of your body, your mind, your soul is important. And if you don't do that, you're more likely to fall back into those bad debt habits and not get debt free. For the champagne and hooker standpoint, though, this may mean cutting something like spending money on books and movies out. But instead, you can go to the library and check them out for free or for a yearly fee at your library. Like some libraries have a $50 a year fee that you pay. Okay, well, that's better than spending $400 or $500 or $3,000 on entertainment, right? It does limit what you can look at, but you can still have that element in your life that allows you that time to relax without spending so much money. Or it may mean that you get to buy one bottle of expensive bourbon a year. Isn't that cool? Yeah. So one bottle of expensive bourbon a year and savor those moments when you get to have one. Like when we were plumbing problem free for like a day after going so many days without having a plumbing problem free, I got to share one drink of a nice bottle of bourbon with all my friends. And that was kind of cool. And I enjoyed that moment. And it was not an instant gratification at that point. It was a celebration. Well, either way you crack that nut, I recommend never adding actual hookers to your list of things that you keep in your life because that's just a bad road to travel. And that's my perspective. So I guess my point with all of this is on the champagne and hooker thing, look at what your list is, list them out, think about if they need to completely go away. If there's something you budget from time to time, like a biannual golf day or something, I don't know what your champagne and hooker items are. And if there's something that when used right can actually move you forward, like maybe you have a habit or a hobby that costs a lot of money that gives you instant gratification that could be turned into a lifelong thing that you love to do and you can make money from it as a side hustle. Having fun and earning money. Good idea. And also think about what you can do instead of those things that you want to cut. Like enjoying a nice mocktail instead of a cocktail or a cup of tea. I've really gotten into tea. So I'm doing this keto thing, and that's also reduced any alcohol consumption I do. I've really gotten into some teas. Angie's Gardens makes great teas, and I've just been trying them, and that I'll start having an evening tea instead of a cocktail. And that may seem like, Nicole, you're a quitter, but I don't know, they're pretty good. Or you can replace going out to dinner with a hike in the woods and a picnic on a nice day. Don't have to spend $150 on sushi. You can spend like $5 on the food you bring with you. You can replace the money spent on video with your library card, as I mentioned before. Learn to gourmet cook. Learn to cook really, really well, and you will find yourself not wanting to go out because you can cook better than most restaurants. It's also a great way to save money, right? And actually, guys, I mean, transparently, I still go out to eat. I just don't go out to eat very often, and I'm careful when I do, right? That I build it into the budget. So I think the cool thing about the replacement process is often you end up getting to enjoy the things that you've replaced the other things with more than you ever enjoyed the thing that you were doing that was leading you down the wrong road. And you also learn a life skill set in many cases. Like if you learn to cook that well, that's a life skill set that can lead you more towards independence. And, it's kind of cool, right? So I guess I want to end by saying this. Really, just stay away from gambling and hookers. With that, if you like the show and want to support the work I do, you can do it in a couple ways. One, get your coffee at hollerroast.com. That's hollerroast.com. We've got Jack's Bourbon cooled in. I've sold about half of it. I need to update the inventory on the website, though. It says more. We have more than we do. And then also you can become a member. Members get access to training webinars. They're really great. We've got our third webinar of 6 this year coming next week on Wednesday at 7 p.m. with Sue Zoldak. I've put a link in the show notes if you want to sign up for that. If you're not a member, sign up for your membership first. Basic membership is $50, and that gets you access to 2 of the 6. And premium membership gets you all 6, unlimited playbacks, everything you need. That's $120. All of that's over at livingfreeintennessee.com. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week. Okay, we're done. that's the podcast. Now I'm going to mix it. So I hope you guys who stayed with me really enjoyed watching that process. This one didn't have at some point, if you stick around long enough, like on my Monday ones, that's when I tend to get into those little rabbit holes. So thanks for checking it out the first time. Talk to you next time. As soon as I figure out how to end the stream.